Listen to your favorite shows live and on demand 24/7. Download the 77 WABC mobile app now. The sound of praise for your Sunday morning.
The only one who could ever teach me
Introducing Reverend A.R. Bernard of the Christian Cultural Center
was the son of a preacher man.
and Rabbi Joseph Potasnik of Religion on the Line.
The only one who could ever teach me.
Now on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Here's the Rev and the Rabbi, where faith matters.
Good morning, I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, I don't know if you saw this, but in the Olympics, there was an individual, a competitor, judo competitor from Tajikistan, and he refused to shake hands with the Israeli. Just refused to shake hands. And the person who refused to shake hands in that match dislocated his shoulder. So maybe there was a message from above.
What do you say?
He lost.
What do you say, Rabbi?
Karma?
Karma?
Karma comes at you in a, it can be very ugly sometimes. Couldn't put his hand out to shake hands. We talk about good sportsmanship and all of that, and some of these people, because they disagree politically with something you've said or done, I can't shake your hand. And you think that in sports, leave it outside. Leave it, out of the Olympics, but no. Listen, we saw people get killed in the Olympics years ago because they were Israeli.
And what is that? Our need to protest. We seem to have that. And of course, in a country of freedom like the United States, we're big on protests. We have this need to express our objection to something. And I believe protest is important. We need to stand up and sometimes against certain things. But we take it as a freedom and a need to do it just ad hominem.
Yeah, I was talking to a district attorney about the protests and some of the unlawful protests. And he said, I wish we could indoctrinate people with the ethics of protest. There is a way to protest, there is a way not to protest. And when you have protest that threatens others, that says some of the most horrific things. I was watching a protest that took place this past week in Times Square. And, again, Hitler was right. And holding up pictures of the Hamas leaders and glorifying them. You had a leader of Congress, Rashida Tlaib, who, said, oh, what a terrible thing. And, upheld the so-called the dignity of those who destroyed human lives, who were eventually assassinated, I say thankfully. But we have to know how to protest. And we have to teach young people how to protest. You mentioned something to me earlier in terms of pop culture. When you ask young people, this is true for years, who their heroes are, who comes out? Jesus and Moses? Not usually coming out on top.
Not anymore.
Right?
Not anymore.
But it's who is it? It's some of the stars, the popular stars of the day.
I have to ask you about, because you introduced a term there, the ethics of protest. Now, was that a course that you studied in law school, or
no?
Just something
I just made it. I just made it up.
You just made
it up. No. I think
on the fly.
I think
I love it.
No, but I think you have to know how we protest. Many of us took part in protest. Protest is part of our DNA when you live in a free society, and also when you're a person of faith. I mean, weren't the prophets major protesters? Right?
Yeah.
They led the struggle very often, but you have to know what to say, how to say it, and what not to say, what not.
Well,
to
see,
do.
that's and I think when you use the word ethics, ethics of protest, that means there's rules of conduct that involve balancing, the rights of freedom of expression and assembling together. But also considerations of how it impacts others, legally, and the potential harm that it can create. I think it's important that we do think about those things, that we do understand that we have a right to protest, but there are guidelines, ethics, like you said, when it comes to expressing our disagreement or objections to something. Yes? I think that's really a good term. Great
we
term.
remember when we went to school, remember the Vietnam protests? And there were people who were classmates who were on both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different sides of the issue, but they went to class together and they were able to somehow study, in the same study hall and talk to one another. And things have changed. I was talking to a student at one of the universities here in New York, and she said to me, there's someone out there who, says Hitler was right. When I walk on the campus, I see a sign during the protest, Hitler was right. I go to my classroom, and there he is, sitting next to me. She says, how do you think I feel? The guy who thinks Hitler was right is my classmate. How do I have a conversation with that person? Where's the common ground? So, yeah, how to protest, what the appropriate words are, the bullying that goes on today, the verbal bullying, and it's just wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah. There's a lot of hostility, and people are not getting it out the right ways. We used to play a game, go to a movie, work out in the gym, do something to channel that. But now it's like we've got to make it personal and take it out on others. I don't know how much time before we get into our guests, but you and I were talking about pop culture over spiritual growth and inner development, that our society, our young people have changed. It was about, for us, a set of values and principles that were moral and give us guidance for life. But now things have changed in this world. The conversations about pop culture are more important to many of our young people and some of our older people than inner development. And the question is, why is that? Why do you think that is? That they'd rather talk about the latest movie or what's going on in the celebrity world, and talk about the deeper things.
You mentioned the word conversations.
Mm-hmm.
How little or how few are the conversations, for example, between parents and children? You remember when you come home from school, sit at the dinner table, what would our parents ask us? What did you learn today? What did you study today? And we had to have an answer. And we did have an answer. David Banks, the chancellor, Department of Education, has said, we have to teach young people to ask the following. What did you read? What book are you reading? What article are you reading? We have to change the level of discourse. So we're talking about things that are substantive, not things that are just so fleeting that are popular today and gone tomorrow. But you got to have conversations.
And I'm thinking about religion, because we are clergy. We bring a moral value consensus to society. I say it all the time. But people are saying, well, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what's popular, the latest movie, what's happening in the celebrity's life. What do we need to do as religious leaders to change that narrative and encourage more conversations about spiritual growth, about inner development? What do we need to do, Rabbi?
I think we need to show people, especially young people, that the values that we espouse, when you look at our traditions, are not transitory, that they lasted all the years and continue to live today. Right? And when we spoke about whatever the value was, loving your neighbor, that has great meaning. It doesn't just mean wave when you walk, by the person, but loving your neighbor means caring about a person, knowing the welfare of your neighbor. When someone is hurting, being there to support and strengthen that individual. Respecting parents. What does that mean? I don't like the phrase "my old man." I hear that every so often. People say "my old man," or they see the 19-year-old sees the 60-year-old parent or grandparent as a friend. I don't think they're friends. I think there's a certain responsibility to be a role model, not to be the friend. So I think we have to do a better job of.
I think you've hit something. Yeah, because relevance and accessibility. I think about the fact that it's too often that these values of inner development and spiritual growth are dismissed as irrelevant. they're not related to contemporary issues. And that's a challenge that we have. How can we show that our faith traditions and the principles and values of our faith actually relate to what's happening today, to current social, environmental, personal issues? I think demonstrating relevance is critical, because when I'm crafting my sermon, I'm thinking of connecting the two worlds, the world of the past that produced the principle, the moral value, and the present, and how, even though thousands of years have passed, it's still relevant, it still relates, it's still true for us today. You agree?
100%. When sometimes I remember when people would come to me with different readings that they wanted offered at their weddings, and I would say, that's a very nice reading, but can I show you where it comes from? I would look at the Song of Songs or other writings of some of the great theologians, and I say those sentiments are expressed here. So I just want you to know it didn't happen. What does a friend always say to me? I was born at night, but not last night. So
Yeah.
This didn't just happen because it's popular today. This happened because it was made popular many years ago, and maybe if you knew, the history of it, you'd appreciate it even more, but know where it comes from.
And I think that what we have to communicate is that the times were different when our texts were written, but human nature was the same.
Yeah.
And human nature continues to be the same. Generation after generation, thousands of years can pass, and it's dealing with human nature, how we understand ourselves, how we interact with other people in this world. That's the beauty of all this, Rabbi.
Well, we have a guest today that can bridge the yesterdays and todays. He was a governor years ago, but he's still a governor in our eyes today. He always has something to say which we find relevant, meaningful. Of course, that's David A. Patterson, and we're going to interview him today.
Yeah, so stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on 77 WABC.
And thank you to our producer, Ava Anderson, who does such a great job each and every week.
Where faith matters. The Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Rev, once again, we're honored to have the 55th governor of the state of New York, one of our favorite people, who really, I believe, is not afraid to take a position. It's not a question of popularity. It's a question of principle with him, and I admire him for that. So, Governor David Patterson, thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And firstly, I spoke to the Reverend yesterday, and both of us, express our condolences to you, the passing of your mom. And, they say that may the branches be as strong as the roots. That's a blessing. From what I can tell, you've been given some very strong roots by both mom and dad.
Yeah.
Well, my mom was not, known for a lot of things. Obviously, my father had run for lieutenant governor with Arthur Goldberg, and he was the first African-American Secretary of State in New York, and he was deputy mayor for labor relations. He did a lot of great things. But there are sometimes people among us who do great things, but not too many people know about it. And the great thing she did was that when I was school age and we were living in Brooklyn in the spring of 1959, the New York City public school system told her that they would not put a disabled student in the class with the other students. My mother, who was herself a third grade teacher, hit the ceiling. She wasn't taking it. So she went all around the greater metropolitan area. She went to Westchester. She even went to Connecticut. And finally, the village of Hempstead, Long Island, which was probably one of the top 3 school districts in the state, offered her the opportunity to bring me into the kindergarten class, saying that they were breaking that tradition and they were now going to have the disabled students learn right alongside the regular students. And if she had not done that, gentlemen, I guarantee you I would not be here talking to you today.
Wow.
Because there were so many young people who basically got warehoused because they had disabilities.
Sure.
But what they did in the Hempstead school system, they had an itinerant teacher that went around and visited all the students and would help them, with their particular problems. And it turned out great for me.
Rev and Governor, when someone would say to my mom, "Oh, so you're a homemaker? Do you do anything else?" She said, "Sir, I'm not a homemaker. I'm an architect of human living and design." And that was her calling. And I think there are many people out there who may not have all the titles, but they did such a great job in raising great children. And your mom is in that category. Thank you.
And you don't realize the value until I sat down with my insurance guy, and he asked me, "Well, how much insurance do you think you need for your wife?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. What do you suggest?" He said, "Well, what does she do?" And by the time he finished going through all that she does and how much insurance it was going to take, I had a newfound appreciation for my wife, believe me.
Yeah. And I hope you raised the benefits on that policy, did you?
Of course.
And the premium as well. Yeah. Governor, I want you to know the other day, the Rev called me, and I had to use all my skills to bring some calm.
You would bring this up.
I did. And I walked him off the ledge. I walked him back. He was,
furious,
use the word passionate.
incensed.
Incensed is a better word. But it was an interesting conversation. Rev, you want to pick it up from there?
Governor, what it was, I had just finished watching the interview at the National Association of Black Journalists with Donald Trump, Rachel Scott, Harris Faulkner, and a young lady from an organization. I was not too familiar with her, but Governor, I was upset, and it wasn't with Trump. I was upset with NABJ. I was upset with how that was all put together. And I will tell you, I was just, so when Rabbi and I started speaking, I said, "Man, I'm done here." And of course, it blew up in the news and everybody had their perspective on it. I just felt that, if you're going to go ahead and have, Donald Trump come in, at least be prepared. Be prepared for the conversation. Be prepared for the level of excellence necessary. All of that.
Yeah, but
And
Rev,
that
you
got
also,
me, man.
but you also added, which was interesting, the amateurish aspect of it. A half hour later than it was scheduled, the microphones were not working well. Those things just shouldn't happen. You and I know whenever we had a program, I remember in my earlier years, I would always test the mics because a program could be ruined because of defective equipment. You got to make sure it's perfect, as well as the air conditioning.
Look, I heard because we're doing a special event there on this Sunday coming, and I heard that he was late, but they started late, and then with the equipment not being top notch, that's a judgment. That's a quality judgment, and it wasn't a good look. So that's why I was upset, Governor Patterson. But the rabbi talked me off the ledge.
Well, it certainly was a unique situation when the president started saying that he knew Kamala Harris. I don't know how he knew her, but that she always represented herself as Indian. Now, my cousin is a very good friend of Kamala Harris's best friend, and they go back to when they were teenagers. And he told me on Friday that Kamala Harris always referred to her Indian ancestors or family members that were in India, but that she always identified as an African American. She was in the African American sororities and that kind of thing. And so I just thought that this was an organized attempt to make it look like she changes who she is every place she goes, because the vice presidential candidate on the Republican Party, J.D. Vance, he was saying that when she goes down south, she speaks with a Southern accent. Now that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I
And
know, I
now,
know.
I think there's a particular quote from her where she said, and as you all say down here, and then she did mimic a Southern accent, but it was very clear to everyone that she was saying what she thought in with their accent, how they would feel, which
So-
people do that all the
Yeah,
time.
But is this the issue you want to pick on? In other words, if you're having a discussion about your adversary, you're going to go into Indian, black, accent.
Well, remember the event. Remember the
so
event.
you're trying to
Black,
discredit the person, or you're trying
well,
to?
look, he went after her identity. Why? Because he's sitting in a convention with the National Association of Black Journalists. So he understands his context. Look, Kamala Harris's father was Black Jamaican. The mother was Asian Indian. She went to Howard University. She was part of Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is a Black sorority. So she always identified, as African American. That goes without saying. But President Donald Trump took advantage of the opportunity, and that was his play. I get it. I just felt that the journalists, could have been more prepared the way it was organized. I don't know if three people, a panel of three journalists facing him, was the way to go with that. I don't know who controlled, the way it played out, but it just, it wasn't a good look.
Yeah. I
And
just,
nobody really called him on it as he went through these
Right.
accusations, which was it was surprising that nobody said, "Hey, wait a minute, Mr. President. I'm sure you talk about your Irish heritage. You do it all the time. Nobody thinks that relates to the presidential race, and nobody's called you on it. But now you're going to start going through." Someone's pretending to be black, pretending to be Indian. If you give us an example of when that happened, and that would have been the question that he would not have been able to answer. Yeah. I see what the issue is with him, but I think you're right. When you're having that kind of an event and you're that large an organization, you've got to do better than that.
Yeah, but I think also we got to focus on issues. People want to know where do you stand? Where does she stand?
Why would we want to do that, Rabbi? That was just
forget the issues. Let's focus on the individual, black, Indian, Jewish. Look, I hear about Josh Shapiro. You can't put Josh Shapiro on the ticket because, he's Jewish, and that's going to hurt her because an African American and a Jew together on a ticket. It's not the
Wait,
right
isn't
look.
it too late for that? Her husband's Jewish. What do you mean?
Well,
on the ticket.
But that compounds it.
At home.
That compounds out.
We
Too many Jews.
Get to the ticket.
Too
We're
many
at home
Jews.
with it.
And then Mark Kelly is married to a Jew. I mean, where does this stop?
I'll tell you one thing that's kind of interesting. This is just about the race and not this nonsense that we've had to, to try to explain to the listening audience. But Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, canceled all of his events in the Hamptons, where I am right now. He canceled them Friday. He is being vetted by the Harris, people, and they've scheduled a press conference for Tuesday at Philadelphia. If they take anyone to be vice president other than him right now, that will be a real snub. Because he was about to raise a lot of money out here.
Wait a minute. You're in the Hamptons?
Yes.
You're Jewish?
Of course.
Yeah.
When you need to be, you are who you need to be when you need to be. That's it.
It just troubles me that we got to reach a point. I was talking to my son, and I said, I hope one day when, as you get older and he votes now and he takes it seriously, is that we're going to get more focused on the issues of the day and not the ad hominem stuff, because that's not what we should be. We talk to people, don't look at the outside, look at the inside of an individual. And we're not at that point, obviously.
I went back and listened to the Nixon-Kennedy debates from 1960. And in they had two debates. It was an hour and a half each. In the 3 hours, I don't think they moved away from issues more than once or twice, and that was sort of like poking a little fun at each other. Nothing really, devastating. And that's what I would dream we would see whenever Harris and the former president debate, probably next month.
Yeah. And the outside court of opinion, they were talking about John Kennedy the Catholic. And is he going to take his orders from the Pope? Right?
Yes.
These two were talking about issues, but the world outside of them, talking about the individual.
Absolutely.
And that worked. Well, so let's talk about issues. Rabbi, you, I, and the Cardinal put out a statement in response to the opening ceremony of the Olympics, because it was very clear to most people, even though, there was an attempt to deny its relationship with the Last Supper. And, we put out a statement that, pushed back against it. Governor, I think you're aware of the opening ceremony and how they depicted the Last Supper, but this was LGBTQ, right? Now, look, I am like this, all right? Every citizen of this country should have a right to participate fully in the social and political life of American society without discrimination, without, any type of threat of oppression or marginalizations or disenfranchisement or anything. But there are certain things that have boundaries of sacredness and respect. And when it comes to our faith, that Last Supper has a deep and profound symbolism to us as people of faith. And to treat it with that level of disrespect was problematic. And I just credit you, Rabbi, because you and I had the conversation. You called me and you said, what do you feel about this? I said, look, this is not right. And you were willing to stand with the Cardinal and with myself as Christians to say, no, we can't allow this.
Look, I have
put
to
out
say,
a statement.
I often criticize members of my community who begin a sentence as a Jew and then, start with their critical attacks. But let me begin by saying, as a Jew, I was offended that Christians were being offended. The Olympics is a place where we come together, we share common values, we share common interest, we believe in the sportsmanship that must transcend any particular political point of view. And to see the Last Supper, which is so sacrosanct for Christians, but also should be respected by others because it is sacrosanct, to see that kind of public insult, I thought was wrong. And the apology compounded the problem. You saw it, Rev. If you're offended, we're sorry. Come on.
Yeah. Like I said, it's our fault for being offended.
Yeah.
I put out a post. I put out a post on social media, Instagram. It simply said, although we seek to bring God's love, life, and light to a spiritually and morally unhealthy world, we will not tolerate blatant respect of our sacred symbols. The Last Supper is a deep and profound moment in human history, symbolizing ultimate sacrifice, redemption, and communion with God.
Yeah.
Hashtag outrage. You should have seen within an hour, the comments exploded for and against, attacking me and some celebrating me for even weighing in on this thing.
Governor,
we've got to set boundaries.
Governor, we have proudly in the state an interfaith network that stands in solidarity when any member of the faith community is attacked in any way. I know very well anti-Semitic attack, Christians and Muslims will stand with us. Vice versa, we stand with them. And unless we have boundaries, then the slope is dangerous. It's more than slippery, it's dangerous. And I felt the Olympics, shame on you. And what bothers me more is I understand that depiction of the Last Supper was approved by the higher ups. It went all the way up, and nobody found it offensive.
Well, Rabbi, that's what I feel is the anger I feel about that situation is that somehow it went up the chain, and apparently nobody raised their voice to say, wait a minute, this is going to offend a lot of people, not just the people who are Catholic, but anybody who's reasonable and respects anyone else's religion. You're mocking it. You're creating a situation that actually never existed at the Last Supper. I think it was absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
And by the way,
I will raise this. I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
You don't see them doing that with Muslim religion. You don't see them doing that so much with Islam.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of that type of thing going on when it comes to the Muslim faith. I mean, am I missing something? Or do you guys agree? Disagree?
I agree.
And I think it's because of the way, communities react to these things.
And by the way,
when there's an attack, gentlemen, I have to go to a United Jewish appeal event right now. I have to go right at this moment.
All right, we're going to let you go, but first, when you go to a United Jewish appeal, you have to make a commitment, a fiscal commitment, Governor. So let me give you the Rev's checking account number.
There we go.
Yeah.
On the air.
I would just say this in conclusion.
Right?
When there's an attack, for example, on the LGBTQ community, we would speak out. We don't want to see anybody suffer any indignity. But this here was wrong, offensive, and I was proud as a Jew to stand with Christians and anyone else, people of faith, because something so sacred was treated so insultingly.
I'm as proud as of the two of you who I partner with every few weeks or so for taking such a strong stand. And the next time, call me. I'll sign up.
All right. And by the way, a Jewish event is always late, Governor, so don't rush so much. Because it's not starting on time. Trust me on that one.
Well, Governor, thank you for starting your Sunday morning with us. Amen.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
Thank you.
All right.
More celebrations of life in the future.
There it is. And we'll be back. Stay tuned for more of the Rev and the Rabbi.
Reverend A.R. Bernard, Rabbi Joseph Potasnik, the Rev and the Rabbi. Talk Radio 77 WABC and the all-new WABCRadio.com.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Whenever we have the governor, what I like is we can have a very candid conversation. No one has to hold back on views. With any of our guests, we're always able to speak openly and honestly. Not to please people, but to say what we think is right in our hearts and hopefully in the hearts of many others. I was incensed because I felt we often hear how others are offended, but somehow, if I can quote my friend Bill Donahue, it's okay to offend Christians. Because they won't get that angry. They won't fight back.
Exactly right. That's the reputation we have. The Muslims have a reputation that if you say something or depict anything related to their faith, they become violent. But the Christians, we turn the other cheek, love your neighbor thing.
And Jews, let me have a Jews.
There's no respect.
I used to think when it came to Jewish people that we would shout, and we did. And when we saw wrong committed against our own community, we did. But I also have to say there are times I've been disappointed in members of my community who I felt had an obligation to speak out, especially Jewish public officials who have a platform, that they would say something and they were silent. So mixed reviews on our behavior, but I think from a faith point of view, there's no such thing as an innocent bystander. If you see something, shout something. You can't just close your eyes when tears are being shed, when others are being hurt. And when it's your community, you certainly have to stand up. And I always admire people who stand up for their own, even when they're being attacked by others for doing so. But you have to look in the mirror. I often tell my son that. You do what you think is right. Hopefully it's rooted in some kind of moral foundation, but do what you think is right.
Yeah. And look, I just commend you, Rabbi. We had this conversation. We talked about, a response, and you were ready to go. And I thought that was very, very important. Of course, the Cardinal was very excited about the fact that we were willing to pull together and put out a statement. But let me ask you a question. In your faith tradition, just how responsible is the spiritual leader to weigh in on these cultural issues?
I go back to Hillel, who was a contemporary of Jesus, and Hillel would say that famous statement, if I am not for myself, who am I? If I am only for myself, what am I? So, right, you have to be particular for your own. You have to be universal. We believe in ethical monotheism, a belief in God, but also behavior that is moral towards other human beings. So I think as a spiritual, you said leader, if you are really a leader, you can't just wait to see what others do before you do it. You have to be willing to stand up for what bothers you, what you think needs to be said and heard. I don't think people will really, or if they do fault you, it's not something that is based on something that is solid. How do you fault someone who stands up and yells because this is what he believes morally? How do you fault that person?
Mm-hmm.
You can disagree. Disagreement is fine, but don't denigrate someone else who has the courage and conviction of taking a particular stance. And I often feel silence. In Jewish law and the Talmud, if you are silent, it's a form of acquiescence. They're saying shtika kahoda'ah. Silence is a form of agreement. If you say nothing, that means you're agreeing with what has just been said that you find offensive.
Wow, silence means agreement. That's strong. So what you're telling me here, Rabbi, that to a degree, and in some sense, we are social critics. We have a responsibility to observe what's happening in the culture within society and give commentary from time to time. We're not to weigh in all the time, that's our job, but we do have a degree of responsibility. Yes?
So when you look at the Torah, there's the famous line that Christians and Jews, all faiths, support, love your neighbor. But if you look at the Torah, in the same line, the same sentence, it says, rebuke your neighbor. Love your neighbor, rebuke your neighbor. So that means that, you love, you try to find all of that which is right, but you also have a responsibility to rebuke the person that you love. Love comes with responsibility, so you don't have the luxury of being silent. And I don't think people respect leaders who are silent. I don't remember growing up and ever thinking highly of people who weren't there, who didn't say something when something needed to be said. And hopefully we're the ones who create an example for others to say, you know what, I may disagree with them, but at least they have the courage to say what they felt.
All right. So while I'm interviewing you today on this program, The Rev and the Rabbi, so in the service, in the synagogue, right, when you gather on the Sabbath, all right, is part of your sermon weighing in on social issues from time to time? I'm not saying every sermon. I mean, when people come in, do they expect you to make commentary? Because in our faith tradition, it's expected. If there's something significant that hits moral and ethical, crosses those boundaries in any way you throughout the week, my congregation is expecting me to weigh in. They want to know, okay, what does our faith tradition have to say about this particular thing? Is that the same expectation with you?
You and I were together at City Hall recently. The mayor had convened a group of faith leaders to speak out about, civility or the lack of civility. And in the room was a public official. I'm not going to mention him because, he didn't give me permission to mention him. But he said something that I found very interesting, which I've always believed. He said, when I go to the synagogue, I'm not looking to hear what the New York Times says. I'm looking to hear what the Torah says about some of the issues that are mentioned in the paper. I want to know what does my religion say about what's going on today? That's the prism I want to hear. And if there is something that is very disturbing, then yes, but do it predicated on text. Do it predicated on tradition. So you have a strong argument, and I think people want to hear that. I was talking to someone we know and admire. Remember Jim Forbes? Reverend
Oh,
Forbes,
yeah.
and he was at Riverside
yeah.
Church, probably one of
Mhm.
the stellar preachers of our time. And he's now in North Carolina. And every so often I would call, "How are you?" And I was a great admirer of his homiletic style, his preaching ability. And I said, and now he teaches, by the way, homiletics at Duke. Maybe we ought to have him on the air. He's very good. And I said, there are a number of young people I find, some of the seminarians, they don't take preaching as seriously as we did. He said, that's why I'm teaching homiletics. I want them to take it seriously. But people, when they come to CCC, and I've met many of your members, they're devoted to you. They're devoted to the church, but they're also there because they want to walk away religiously enriched. They want to walk away and say, the Reverend took a position today and I learned something from it. And the learning is based upon how you brought in Christianity in looking at the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is right. I think that is our responsibility.
Yep, absolutely, Rabbi. And homiletics has to do with the art of preaching, the art of communicating, because we have a responsibility to speak to the social mind. We are challenged to bring the text in a way that it's alive and relevant to the experiences that our people have on a daily basis. And you're right. What does my faith say about the events of our day? And with that said, Rabbi, and consistent with what we were talking about the governor, I wish he had more time to stay with us this morning. But, there was another situation where, again, the Olympics, Italian boxer, Angela Carini,
Mm-hmm.
she trained hard to get to where she was for the Olympics, ready to compete. And she went up against a biological male boxer who now identifies as female. 46 seconds into the fight, she throws in the towel. She says, "No, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I am fighting a man." He clocked her twice in the face, gave her black eye, immediate black eye in the left eye, and she realized, I can't keep up with this. I can't compete with this. What say you about this? Because for me, I'm not even talking about a moral issue here. I'm talking about fairness.
Basic,
I'm talking about
right.
fairness, justice here. I mean, just talk to me, Rabbi.
When you have individual versus individual, team versus team, you're supposed to have people in there who are somewhat on a level playing field. Am I right? They're fighting one another, but each party is recognized as having a chance to be the victor. But this here is so inherently unfair that you don't have a chance. So why even have a match when it's predetermined who's going to win?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And why should you?
Right.
Yeah. So why is that what Olympics are about? Having these predetermined matches, putting a person who's on one level against someone who's on a different level physically? That makes sense. That's fair. I don't get it.
And see, that's the thing, because we talk about equity and equality and all that. Look, in our faith tradition, I'll ask you yours, but in our faith tradition, men and women are ontologically equal. We are equal in being. We are equal in dignity, but we are physically and functionally different, uniquely different.
Mm-hmm.
And to try to ignore that or say that, if I decide to change my gender identity, my body doesn't undergo an immediate transformation into my now desired transition. You know what I mean? She was fighting a man. She was fighting a biological male. So I think that there has to be boundaries. There has to be limitations. There has to be fairness in how we try to apply these levels of freedom that's being pushed in our society. What does your tradition say?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Well said. If you look at the story of creation, there's a dual story. And commentators ask, why are we repeating the story of creation? Male and female, he created them. And the answer is because there are two acts of creation, the physical and the spiritual. Spiritually, they were equal. Physically, they were different.
Yes.
And I think, I don't know why, somehow we take the difference and we find that wrongful in the name of equality. In other words, we have to make men and women equal physically.
In
right?
every way.
In every way.
In every way. Yeah. Which is not true.
Right. And she paid a price for it. So is he proud of himself for being, victorious there? And she was,
there's nothing to be proud of.
Right.
Rabbi, right. Exactly. What did you earn?
Yep.
What did you earn in that fight? And like you said, there was a predetermined outcome on that. I felt for her because can you imagine how much time and effort and discipline and preparation she put in for that moment to have it stripped from her because of an imbalance, because of unfairness? I don't know. Our society is going in directions that are just absurd. It's not reasonable. There's no rational, logical.
The Olympics allegedly about being competitive. And when you're being competitive, it means you're fighting against a competitor, someone who can compete with you. So the outcome is not predetermined. This was like wrestling. you know who's going to. I mean, professional wrestling. You know who's going to win.
WWF.
Yeah. But it was wrong, and she, she shouldn't have been put in that position. It was wrong. So I hope there's enough of an outcry. Once again, people need to speak out because this kind of inequity should not be tolerated.
Yeah, and there's fear, Rabbi, because the politics associated with this, special interest groups. I mean, so there is this fear to say anything because you may offend someone, and the backlash. But at what point do we, especially we as clergy, we have a prophetic responsibility to speak truth into the culture? The prophetic is not just predicting the future. No, it's primarily analyzing the present and understanding the spiritual, moral, political, and social conditions of the society in relationship to natural order as well as divine order.
Have you heard any justification for what happened? Have you heard people say,
I haven't. No.
I haven't. I want to hear the argument why this is right, why this is fair. I haven't heard it yet, but I'm sure there'll be someone say, well, you have to recognize the reality. If this is who a person identifies as, that's a reality that you have to recognize. So.
Well, that's what one Olympic official said. This is what he said. Basically, the Olympic Committee has decided that this is okay. So based upon those rules, who am I to judge? But that's a problem. You and I understand the importance of law. But we also understand there are things called unjust laws that have to be changed. That was the whole idea of the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're saying, okay, these are laws, but these are unjust laws, and they need to be challenged and to be changed, especially when it creates the kind of unfairness that young lady went through. And I felt for her. She was my daughter.
They will call us names. We're bigoted, we're prejudiced, we're arcane, we're old-fashioned, right? We're stuck in the past, all of those things. It's okay. You can call us the names. We'll continue to fight for what's right.
Absolutely. And continue to have conversations like this, conversations of consequence right here on the Rev the Rabbi Show, 77 WABC.
Thank you.
Great program, Rabbi.
Well,
so join us again. Next time, you're going to say something to wrap up?
No, I just say I look forward to this because, when you hear people getting slammed one way or the other, when you hear the kind of, what should we say, insulting discussion, and it's not even discussion, the put-downs of one another, the debasement of the other, I say, thank God we have these opportunities, these little oases where we can talk civilly, and walk away and saying, doesn't matter if you disagree. What matters is that we maintain respect for one another.
Absolutely. Dignity and respect. And join us again next time, right here on 77 WABC, the place of conversation of consequence with the Rev
and the Rabbi.
And the Rabbi.